Hello everyone. It's been a while since I've made any of these videos, so I thought I would get back on here and post some videos that might be helpful to you. As you well know, we're all going through such a strange transition in our society and in our personal lives, and that requires some decision making on our part. And I would wonder, if I were to ask you, do you want God's will to be done? I think most of us would say, yeah, we would want God's will to be done because we innately know that His will is the best way. Even if it's a harder decision or harder path, we know that His will is the best. So I'm going to lay out some strategies that might be helpful for you in your decision-making process. But first, did you realize that your life has a landscape which can be observed and interpreted when you're trying to make very difficult decisions? And sometimes in the decision process, because of that landscape that we have in our life, that we automatically, if we're looking at that landscape, we automatically know what the wrong decision would be, because if we were to make the decision in that direction, it would lay outside entirely what our whole makeup has been about over our lifetime. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the landscape here at the end of the video. So what are some strategies you can use in discerning God's will in this decision-making process? Well, I have some strategies here, and I call them the 5 P's. And so first, we would start with the first one would be prayer. Of course, this should go without saying, but as Christians, our first instinct in making decisions should be to pray. But my question for you is, what do you pray for when you're making these decisions? Do you pray for God to do this, to do that, and you dictate to God what you want to happen? That's probably not the best way to go about prayer. I think the best way that the Bible would talk about prayer would be, first of all, pray that God's will be done. We see this modeled for us in the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus, prior to his crucifixion, and he asked God the Father, if it's your will, remove this cup from me. And of course, God did not remove that cup from him, but he asked for God's will. So we must be willing to ask for God's will to be done, and ask that his will would override our will. That's the first foundational aspect of decision making. The second thing to pray about is, and I think people underutilize this aspect, is praying for wisdom. Ask God for wisdom. The Bible tells us that when we cry out for wisdom, God is happy to deliver wisdom to us. We need to be wise in our decisions within our family, within our job, within our careers, and just a whole host of things. So ask for wisdom for this decision. Ask for it every day until God gives it to you. And another thing that would be a good thing to pray for is ask for God to provide you with wise counsel. God can do this in many different ways. He can do it through videos. He can do it through wise friends or a wise counselor that can help you walk through the different scenarios that you're considering. So ask for God to put wise people in your path and look for those people. God does that. The second P would be the principle of obedience. And the principle of obedience has to do with God's moral will. Did you know that God's moral will has been revealed to us 100% within the scriptures? This is why it's so important for us to know the scriptures, isn't it? Is to understand what God has prescribed for us in our behaviors. So God's moral will actually touches every fabric of our life. It would touch our goals set up for us. In this decision that's coming up for you, is your goal to glorify God, or is your initial goal to meet your interest or greed or things that would not honor God? So it touches their goal. It touches their attitudes. Have you adopted the right attitude in this decision process? Or has it led to a compromise in your attitude? Certainly, God's moral will touches our actions, what we do. So, and all of this really colors our perspective when we're making decisions. So the perspective is part of that landscape that I was talking about as well. If we have a Christian worldview that's informed by the Bible, our perspective can be just so different than what one would think that it would be. So that's very important. The third P would be the principle of freedom. Did you know that a non-moral decision, non-moral will or decision can really give you a great deal of freedom? You have a lot of freedom in your decision-making process if it doesn't have to do with a moral will. If it's just a simple decision, should I move to Seattle or should I move to New Orleans? Should I start this business or should I just go and get some classes and go a different direction? So those are non-moral decisions. And so God gives us a lot of freedom, and it's really about our preferences. What do you prefer? And within this freedom of choice, there could be multiple options that's layered in this specific decision that you're trying to make, and it's just a matter of being wise and navigating it in a way that would be beneficial to you and meet the preferences that you have. We see God allow Adam in the garden to name all of the animals. He just wanted to see what Adam was going to name the animals. God could have told Adam what to name the animals, of course, but he's like, hey, let's just see what Adam will name the animals. So you have that same kind of choice. So it's really helpful to think about decision making in a circle framework. So the bigger circle would be that God's moral will, which restrains us and directs us specifically. But within that moral will circle, you have a smaller circle that is the circle of freedom that gives you a lot of choice in what you want to do. So this is the area that people get hung up in a lot because they want to make the best decision, and they sense that there's many choices and they could do any different direction. So how do you do that? Well, this is the other principles that will help you here. The fourth principle is the principle of design. Do you know that your life has been designed in this landscape that you can interpret, and you can ask the Holy Spirit to help you to interpret that landscape? These are some of the questions that will help you make decisions within this design. What is your spiritual giftedness? What has God gifted you with the abilities to do? What is your natural talents? Do you have natural talents that would really speak to that decision, whether, should I become a teacher, or should I work in an office, or should I have a landscape business? What is your giftedness? So for me, I would have never been able to be a collegiate player, let's say in basketball. I'm not that tall, so I'm not naturally gifted. So that's a decision that I would have never had to make because I'm not naturally gifted in that way. So think about your spiritual giftedness, your natural talents, and your personality. What kind of personality do you have, and does that personality play in this decision? If you are someone who's very gregarious and just a people person, then you're going to be very miserable if you are isolated at your work and you never get to work with people. And the same is true for people who are more inclined to enjoy just their own company, right? You put them in a sales job and they'll be very miserable. So your personality, think about your personality, and the other one is your leadership style. Does that match with what you're trying to decide? So you should consider those things. This is the personal design that you have. So the last P that's very helpful is the principle of experience. So this is really touches down on the landscape of your life. So the experience would include things like your education. How has God fashioned your education? This was a big decision maker for me in my moving on in education. I'm currently in a PhD program, but when I was trying to make that decision, it was such a big burden to decide, because it's a lot of energy and money that you expend in getting that kind of a degree. But I looked back at the education God had shaped. I looked at the desires that I have, the support system that I have in my family. What does other people that know me real well say about that aspect about me? And those all just really lined up well. And so I went ahead and made that decision because I've considered these aspects. Part of your life experience is your family background. Does your family counsel you in one way or the others? Because sometimes our family members know us much better than we even do ourselves at times. So certainly take that into account. Your expertise, your training, your personal struggles, and your hardships. These are things that really speak to decision making. So these are many ways that can help you in making decisions. So just remember the 5 P's. Remember to pray. Remember to consider the principle of obedience, which is God's moral will. The principle of freedom, realizing that you have lots of freedom in the decisions that you make in your life. And within that principle of freedom, you can consider the principle of design. How has God designed you? And the principle of experience. What kind of experiences do you have that would help you discern the wisest path for you and for your family? So I hope this has been helpful for you. If so, be sure to subscribe to my channel and to like and to share. I want to help as many people as I can, and if you find people in need in these different areas that I talk about on these videos, be sure to share them in it. That might be encouraging to them. So anyway, have a great day, and thanks for listening. Bye.